So remind me again, did we have an election? I thought we had an election in 2024, but I could be wrong. Maybe we just put in a placeholder. Because obviously we don't have a president anymore. He just gives suggestions. He really doesn't have any power or authority to do anything. We've just kind of lost that position. Because I guess the judicial branch gets to decide everything that happens with this country. Whether it's in our borders, out of our borders, doesn't matter. Obviously, if the Democrats lose the legislative branch and the executive branch, all they have left is the judicial branch, and I guess the judicial branch is more powerful than everybody else all put together, particularly the smaller judges. So what's up with the judicial branch at assuming so much power and authority where they can just rule everything and shut down anything they want and say, that's not legal, that's not right? Are they all of a sudden more powerful than the congressional branch? Can they now make laws and interpret the laws and enforce the laws? Apparently they can do everything. So since Trump has been in office with his executive orders, there has been over 181 rulings from district judges against his executive orders. Just virtually just shutting everything down left and right. So again, my question is this: does the judicial branch have that much power and authority over the executive branch? Can they determine foreign policy? Can they determine when or where to do tariffs? Can they determine who we negotiate with and when and how we negotiate with foreign countries? Are they the ones that decide which legislative laws can be enforced or are constitutionally correct coming out of the legislative branch? I mean, like right here in my own state of Utah, we're having the similar problems where judges are shutting down laws that come from the legislative branch. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that legislators create the laws and the judges simply interpret the laws that have been created. They do not have the authority to create laws or shut down laws that have been created by the legislative branch. When we have legislators, they go through elections, they go through a profound process to get into that office, and then when they're creating those laws, they have arguments amongst each other as to how that law is going to be finally written and passed. And they're, depending on the state, I mean, our state has well over 100 legislators in it. If you're talking the federal government, you got 435 congressional people plus 100 senators. That's a lot of people that will debate those laws and make sure those laws are correct. A lot of voted for representatives. But apparently the judges can take all that legislation, all those arguments, and supersede 500 some odd people and say, guess what? It doesn't matter how many of your constituents voted you into office or how much you guys legislated this and argued this and got it down to the law you guys wanted to pass. Myself as a judge, I can go in and rehash all that and just decide on my own whether that law is enforceable, yes or no. I'm just going to arbitrarily decide everything. And so the judicial branch can easily supersede the legislative branch, particularly in states. We're seeing the federal level. I'm seeing it a lot here at the Utah level. But then you look at the executive branch as well. Trump is trying to put out lawful executive orders that he does have the authority to do. And apparently these judges are more powerful than the President of the United States. Apparently they got voted into office by majority of the public within the United States. Apparently they were on the ballot back in November, and we as the U.S. population voted these judges into the highest office of the land because they can decide what happens or what doesn't happen President Trump is just a placeholder. He just gives out suggestions. So we can see that the judicial branch is usurping a pretty significant amount of authority that they do not have. And this is, I mean, in Democrats' own terms, constitutional crisis. Because when the Democrats see that they do not have any more authority in the executive branch or in the legislative branch, they start freaking out because they don't know what to do with themselves when they don't have power, when they don't have authority, when what they want to have happen isn't happening. And there's no way in the foreseeable future that they're going to get anything done with either the executive branch or the legislative branch. They're not, because they're in the minority. So I guess the only place they can go to is the judicial branch. And they are, through the judicial branch, usurping a pretty significant amount of authority. We as a public, the government, we're allowing them to have that authority. In the say of, well, we will honor what the courts have to say. In constitutional peace, I guess, we're going to honor what they have to say. What should be happening is each time one of these judges decides to usurp that authority, the suit should be, does a district judge have the authority to even make a ruling, have the authority to make a judgment that supersedes the executive branch, that supersedes the President of the United States? That should be the argument, and that argument needs to go in front of the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. Just to go through a few of these, I mean, there's so many of them, I had to take notes. So let's just go through a few of these so you guys understand how badly this is being affected. I mean, most recently, you've got the judgment against the tariffs. The President of the United States has absolute authority to initiate reciprocal tariffs. That was established 100 years ago. He has that authority. The argument is that the legislative branch is the only branch that has authority to initiate tariffs. But in the case of the reciprocal tariffs, the President of the United States does have that authority. Now, obviously, that argument is going to be played out in court, and we're going to find that those that have brought this case will lose. The problem is the time that it takes to get these things through the courts. The Democrats know that if they prolong it long enough to the midterms, to the next election, as much of these as possible, a lot of these will lose steam, will lose traction, and he will not be able to fully implement any of these orders. Even if they come out the last minute where he's allowed to do that, their hopes is that he will not have time to fully implement any of these orders, and then they can get them reversed. Because again, their only concern is themselves, their own power, their own authority. That is it. They don't care about you, the people. They care about themselves. They care about making money. And so the tariffs are specifically designed to equalize the trade deficits that we have with all these other nations and bring manufacturing back to the United States. That is a long-term goal. That is going to take a pretty significant amount of time to bring that much manufacturing back to the United States. And the left knows it. So if they can slow it down, they can probably just put a kibosh to the whole thing because he will not have enough time to implement it. You've got the legal challenge to birthright citizenship. Trump tried to get rid of birthright citizenship that makes it so that whoever crosses our border can't just have a child and have that child be automatically citizens of the United States. The incentive is completely wrong. It incentivizes too many people to come here purposely pregnant, and I've seen it in person. I've seen it while people come across the border purposely pregnant just to have the baby on this side. Now, the ICE is grabbing up these mothers and fathers that are here illegally and deporting them. And then the left is twisting that we are deporting U.S. citizens. And without explaining it further in the news, what they're really referring to is the child, the baby, the infant that is being deported right along with the parents. And ICE is not mandating that the child be deported. The child can stay because that's the law. They can stay with friends, they can stay with family. But obviously, mom and dad want to have their child with them, and they're learning really quickly that the birthright citizenship, what they wanted to be is their anchor, why it's called the anchor baby, is not going to keep them as parents illegal immigrants in the United States. And that was our whole goal from the beginning, is to have the child and then impede ICE from deporting them as the parents because they have a minor within the United States. And it's that whole twist that the leftists and the news media is trying to do to say that we are deporting U.S. citizens, when it's the parent's choice to bring that child with them to whatever country that they're originally from, because obviously they don't want to leave that child by themselves here in the United States. But the left loves the narrative. The media loves the narrative that we're deporting U.S. citizens. But they had the choice to have the baby here in the United States, and they have the choice whether to leave that in the care of friends or other family that might be here in the United States, or take it with them. And obviously the correct choice, and the choice they're making, is to take the baby with them when they get deported. But you have federal judges, several of them, 4 or 5 of them, that are impeding his executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship. Because if they were to eliminate that, that solves our problem. People are not going to come here on purpose to try to have babies, and they're not going to try to have those anchor babies that keep the parents here in the United States illegally and put a twist on our system. The next executive order it's receiving challenge is the executive order suspending asylum. So down at the southern border, President Trump ended asylum until it meets his new standards and what he would consider as the invasion that happened throughout the Biden administration is at an ultimate end. And we see that happening right now. The number of border crossings is way down, but we also know for a fact that the asylum seekers, the vast majority of them, I think they were counting that 94% of the asylum seekers weren't legitimate asylum seekers, and they're just using that to get their court appointment or their date, and then they would abscond into the country and you'd never see them again. It's a fallacy to think that that is legitimate, that they were really seeking asylum and not just trying to find an excuse and a way and a method to get into the United States. And Trump knew that. ICE knew that. And they were trying to end those false claims of asylum by just eliminating asylum until they could determine a better way of doing that. But again, federal judges have blocked his executive order ending asylum. The next executive order was suspending the sanctuary cities, funding for the sanctuary cities. We all know there's a lot of sanctuary cities out there like Chicago and Boston and a few of these others that are purposely working against the Trump administration and against ICE, trying to impede them at every turn from rounding up illegal immigrants, particularly those that are criminals. And we discussed this in one of my videos that we posted out there last week on the importance of getting rid of illegal immigrants and why the left is fighting that so rigidly. So please watch the video I posted out last Monday, a week ago, and you'll get a lot of detail as to what the left's legitimate plan is and why they're fighting so hard to impede even criminals from being exported or deported from the United States. But again, a federal judge back in April blocked his executive order eliminating funding for sanctuary cities because they're going against the law. They are breaking the federal law and harboring illegal immigrants. That is a law. It is on the books and it is enforceable. Tom Homan and Secretary Noem have both been out verbally saying that those who violate these laws will be arrested. And these sanctuary cities are a part of that. But again, they're suing the Trump administration because he's pulling any funding from them. And I guess these Democrat cities can't live without federal funding. The next one is Schedule F, eliminating Schedule F from the federal employees, which gives Trump the power to essentially fire federal employees. Bypass a lot of the unions that are trying to impede getting these federal employees fired or let go or have them resign. Trump's entire goal here is to get rid of the deep state. And we've discussed this many times before, where those federal employees, if they don't like the president, if they don't like the presidential policies, which the vast majority of them don't, because the vast majority of federal employees are on the left, they are very, very liberal, they're just going to stonewall. They're just going to twiddle their thumbs and do nothing because they know for a fact that they can outlive presidents. They can stonewall for 4 years and ride it out, and hopefully a new president will be in the office that's less conservative, let's put it that way, and then they'll go out and start working again. So this would eliminate, getting rid of the Schedule F would help Trump get rid of the deep state. But the deep state, just like the left and those who are in power, those government officials know that they also have a pretty significant amount of power by just having the jobs, the simple jobs that they have. And then their ability as a whole, as a unit, to, again, stonewall, twiddle their thumbs, and just outlive presidents. And then nothing of the new presidents that come into office, none of them can get anything done because those who are actually supposed to be working and getting things done just don't do it. They don't care about the policies. They're not going to enforce the policies, even though it is their boss doing it, because they have no respect for the president. They have none. They have their own agendas. They have the agendas of the left legislators that are in office, and they answer to them and say, what do we do? Don't do anything. Just wait. Well, we'll get somebody else in office in a couple of years, and then you can go back to working again. Just stonewall. And the deep state problem is a very, very big problem. But yet you've got judges here and labor unions that are suing, saying that that's against the Administrative Procedures Act and the Fifth Amendment, which all is very untrue. You got legal action against DOGE. Ever since DOGE was implemented, you've had a lot of legal actions against DOGE. Every corner, they're trying to shut down what DOGE is trying to do. They're eliminating their personal pocketbooks and every single agenda that the left has ever put together. All this secret funding, all this funds that they've been able to manipulate into the programs that they want to set out, with or without legislative authority, with or without executive authority, they've been able to fund pretty much anything that they've ever wanted to do through USAID, through the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education. All these departments have had all this money running around in their departments, and they've been able to funnel that money any direction they've ever wanted to go with it, because they have the deep state employees who are helping them do that, and they have the people in office that are basically concealing it, hiding it. So as DOGE finds all these bad programs and tries to eliminate them, they're attacking their personal pocketbook, because as we've stated many times before as well, a lot of these programs that USAID has been funding, whoever's trying to get the program done will come in and file for the program. A little bit of the money, maybe 10, 15% of it, will go to some program that's a fake program, and they'll pretend like they're actually doing something that the program states. They'll pocket a whole bunch of money in personal salaries, and then the rest of that money gets woven right back to the United States and gets put into legislative coffers and campaign coffers of all these Democrat officials. It's money laundering. USAID is just a big money laundering network to make the left stay in power and keep those people in office and fund everything they've ever wanted to fund. And obviously when you attack somebody's pocketbook, they're going to get upset about it. And they're pretty upset about DOGE bringing all this to light and attacking their pocketbook. A lot of people should be going to prison because of this. And we all know for a fact that none of them are going to go to prison. Not a single one of these people are going to get prosecuted. None of it's going to see the light of day because even though they're shutting all these programs down, everybody's afraid to make that much corruption out in the open because that would really be detrimental to the confidence we as citizens of the United States have in our government. I mean, we already don't have a lot of confidence, but that could almost destroy things if that much corruption got put out there for all to see. The next one is the Department of Education. Obviously, Trump's goal is to completely shut down the Department of Education. It should never have existed in the first place. That power, that authority to teach our children should be at the local level and should have always been at the local level. That should be back at the states, just like abortion is back at the states. That's how it should be. But again, those who empower want the control. They want the indoctrination. And they're afraid that they cannot control the local levels enough to indoctrinate the next generation. They're going to lose their power to raise their future voters, essentially, to completely change and swing all those children from good, wholesome Christian families, conservative families. They want to purposely swing those to the left and make them progressive, just like we're seeing in all our universities. That is their only goal. That is the only goal of the Department of Education being in place. It's not the funding, because the funding will still be there. It's not all these programs that they're saying you're going to be eliminating. That's the facade. That is the narrative they're trying to put out there to make you or fool you into thinking that Trump is actually destroying something that's important. But all those necessary programs, all those important programs are still going to be in place, just run by other departments. What they're really losing, and if they were honest about it, is the ability for them to indoctrinate the next generation, to have control over the local offices, because that's how they control the states, that's how they control the local districts, is by money. And even though Trump would get sued if he ever tried to withhold money from any of these districts if they didn't teach a certain principle or have certain curriculum within the schools, that's exactly what the left has been doing for years, is if you don't teach this, if you don't have this exact indoctrination within your schools, you're not going to get the federal funding. And then that's how they control local school districts and states. That's how it's always been. They want the control. If they lose that direct access to the school districts and states, they can no longer manipulate them anymore because they're going to get their funding and then they're going to be able to come up with their own curriculum. So again, it's a power grab and they're losing their power. And so they're suing to impede that from happening. So yeah, again, another federal judge back in May blocked the executive order. Next one is Voice of America and other broadcasting stations. Why are we funding foreign broadcasting stations, which is what Voice of America is doing? And again, they're saying that Trump usurped congressional power, that only Congress has the authority to shut down that funding. But obviously, appeals court in May gave Trump the win and allowed him to shut down the federal funding and for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. We should not be funding any of these news media. I mean, if they can't stand on their own, they can't stand on their own. It is not up to the taxpayer to be funding news agencies. And we'll get into NPR because he tries to do that a little bit later. But again, it's if you can't stand on your own like a Fox News or CNN or something like that, then why is the taxpayer supplementing your income? The next executive order is ending collective bargaining within federal agencies. And again, this is the initiative to get rid of the deep state, because without collective bargaining, without the unions, he would be able to let go of the deep state, fire the deep state a lot quicker and a lot easier. Here in Utah, our legislators here, we ended the collective bargaining for all state agencies within the state of Utah. And it made it so that we can get rid of deep state type employees without the fight. It's not disallowing unions, it's allowing that collective bargaining that the federal employees can't get together and manipulate federal agencies into making and forcing them to stay. And again, it's the deep state. They've been in power for so long. They don't want to lose that power. The congressional leaders and the senatorial leaders out there know that they have a lot of federal employees that are under their power and influence, and they can manipulate however they want. And so they don't want to lose those federal employees. Because again, that's how they bypass the president. That's how they bypass the legislative branch if they're not in power. They just go directly to the federal employees and say, do this, don't do that, stonewall this, don't stonewall that, and they can still get everything they want done. They have all these secret funds coming out of these agencies like USAID and others, so they don't need legislation. They don't need executive power. They can bypass all that they want to, because they can manipulate the money to fund their own programs, which is what they've been doing, and they can manipulate the deep state employees to do exactly what they've ever wanted to do. And now that they're lost, again, the executive branch, they don't have the president's office. They've lost the legislative branch because they don't have power in Congress. They are deeply, deeply scared that they're going to lose their deep state operatives, all their federal employees, and the funding that they've been manipulating however they want it to. That's a huge attack on what they've established over the last 40, 50 years. And if Trump is allowed to completely dismantle that, they don't have any power at all. And that freaks them out. But that's good for the rest of us, because then the power will actually go back to the people. Because without the deep state, without their secret funding and their manipulating of money, they won't have the power to manipulate the rest of us, which is what they've been doing for so long. So these executive orders are huge to be able to eliminate all these secret funds and these secret programs and the manipulation of federal funds, and to eliminate the deep state. These executive orders have to be able to go through. And more powerful than that, if our Republican legislators in both the House and the Senate would actually back up and support what Trump's been doing and actually get some legislation done to enforce executive orders, a lot of this wouldn't be a problem. But yet, they're not doing anything in Congress right now. It's shocking me how little that they've done to back up any of these executive orders. Next one is shutting down the U.S. Institute of Peace, which isn't an institute of peace, it's an institute of manipulation. This is how they go to foreign countries, just like with USAID, and say, you're not going to get any foreign aid unless you do this, this, and this. And then they can push on their own woke policies for transgenderism or anything else that they want to within foreign countries, because they hold a paycheck over their head. It's the same exact thing they're doing in the school districts. They want to manipulate local school districts and state agencies. They want to manipulate as much as possible by holding a paycheck over your head and say, you're not going to get federal funding unless you do this, this, and this. So the same thing that they've been accusing Trump of doing, they've been doing for 40 or 50 years. And they've not only been doing it to our local school districts and other state agencies within our states. I've seen it with our own governor, that he was all in on enforcing a mask mandate and all this other kind of stuff because he wanted federal funding. They're doing it to foreign countries. And that's why our name is mud amongst a lot of foreign countries within South America and Central Asia, is because we promise foreign aid, but it always comes with a caveat. And then we call it Institute of Peace, which is evil and wrong. So again, yeah, federal judge impede a judge from shutting that down. Now we get back to public broadcasting funds, because again, he tried to eliminate funds for NPR and PBS, which is the same thing as eliminating the funds for the Voice of America and all those other broadcasting stations. Why are tax dollars going to fund news organizations? I mean, this is a capitalistic economy. If you can't get your own advertisers, if you can't stand on your own, then you belong out of business. Why are taxpayers funding NPR and PBS? Why are we funding that? Particularly when they're so biased and so left-swinging that they're sometimes worse than CNN or MSNBC. Why are we federally funding that? Again, they're saying it's against their First Amendment rights. That's the argument. NPR sued them for First Amendment violations. How is eliminating your funds violating your rights to free speech? You can go out there and talk as much as you want. You can have your news organization out there as much as you want to have it. We're not stopping that. We're just saying you need to support yourself. You need to have your own funding. It is not coming from taxpayers to fund you. And again, a corrupt narrative saying, no, if we don't have money, if you don't give us money, if you don't support us, that's against our First Amendment right of free speech. Again, a lot of these orders are not making sense, and they'll probably not survive. But it slows things down, and it keeps people in power. It keeps the false narratives out there. Now, this next one is one of the worst ones out there, is Trump's order on gender-affirming care orders that makes it so Medicare-Medicaid and government-funded insurance companies cannot fund gender-affirming care. Then he also put out the order that it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. Again, Medicare-Medicaid is subsidized by taxpayers. We, as the taxpayers, should not be funding your sex change. That is not our responsibility. When you're on federal funding, it is for emergency purposes. It's to take care of critical health care needs. It is not to provide you with a sex change or an abortion. That is not why you're receiving taxpayer dollars. You do not have a right to that. That is not something that we as taxpayers should be funding at all. Yet they say it's against the Constitution that we as taxpayers aren't forced into paying their gender-affirming care. Part of that is it impeded Trump from eliminating men in women's prisons. Why can a man claim all of a sudden, I'm a woman, I'm transgender, I'm a woman, and be sent to a woman's prison? How is that safe for the women? How is that safe for the correctional facilities, the guards, or anybody else? So essentially, any man out there who wants to have essentially sex with any of the women in the federal prison system can all of a sudden claim that I'm now a woman and I can go in there. I mean, most of the men, I can guarantee you, that are all of a sudden claiming to be women and transgender are not transgender. So this program is definitely getting manipulated and abused. Why would a judge stop that from happening? If you were born a man, you should be in a man's prison. Period, end of story. This also goes on with the next executive order, which is banning transgender people from serving in the military. Again, the military does not need to be supporting your gender transitioning. We're not paying for it. Taxpayers are not paying for it. That is not the focus of the military. As Defense Secretary Hegseth said, the military needs to have a singular focus of lethality. You are there to fight wars, win wars, and most importantly, prevent wars from happening through show of force. We can't do that if we're so worried about offending transgenderism or paying for transgender care. You cannot be lethal. You cannot be deployable if all of a sudden you need all this medication because you're transitioning. That is not the focus of the military. If you cannot hold up and maintain the same physical requirements, whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're transgender, it doesn't matter what it is. If you cannot uphold those same requirements that all military need to have to be lethal and ready to be deployed, you should not be in the military, period. It is not your position. You need to go find something else to do. The military is designed for lethality and to prevent wars from happening. And if we're weak, we're not going to prevent any wars out there. And that's what this is doing. Transgenderism is weakening our forces. Lowering standards is weakening our forces. Next executive order is diversity, equity, and inclusion, getting rid of DEI in all government agencies. How could that not be a good thing? Again, when we're talking about people that are holding high-ranking positions, you need to be the best at what you do and nothing else. There's no favoritism. It's you can do the job, yes or no, end of story. Do you have the qualifications? Do you have the experience? That's it. Nothing else should be considered when you're looking for federal positions or any positions in any company for that matter. It should be, can you hold that position? We see that in our aviation community. We should see that in the military. We should see that in our intelligence agencies especially. It should be, can you do the position? Are you the best person for the position? Period. Doesn't matter. Nothing else should be considered. Period. Not man, not woman, not transgenderism, not skin color. Nothing else should be considered in a job position other than your qualifications and your work experience. Yet they're saying that the National Association of Diversity Officers in higher education, so it just happens to be our universities that are professors are suing them for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They want to prevent millions in federal grant money that was appropriated from Congress. They want to stop Trump from being able to issue that money out there. Why? Because it's supporting a lot of their woke programs. Again, they're taking those millions of dollars in grant money, and it's not going to set programs. They're manipulating it to anything and everything that they want it to go to, any program that they want, and just being part of the grant money. And so, again, they're losing their pocketbook. They're losing their ability to indoctrinate our kids in the universities and promote social change in their direction, in the wrong direction. So, yeah. Again, federal judge back on February 21st blocked that. Obviously, an appeals court kind of reversed some of it, but not all of it. But for the most part, DEI is getting kicked out, and some of it is being forced to say. But again, these judges do not have any say as to what the president has and is allowed to do in his branch of government. He's the chief executive of the executive branch. He can fire and hire whoever he wants, whenever he wants within the executive branch. It is his branch. It is not that judge's branch. The judicial branch has no say. They need to stay in their branch, and they need to continue to interpret laws and not usurp power and authority over the other branches, because that's the whole reason why we have separation of powers. This is probably one of the most important ones that I see, and that was Trump's attempt to overhaul U.S. elections and require proof of citizenship and an ID in all federal elections. Obviously, the left is deathly afraid of that one. As we also said in that video that we did last week, the entire purpose for having an open border was to import immigrants. They want to have the entire United States, like California or like New York, where it is a guaranteed election to them. They do not want to second guess it anymore. They don't want to have the fight anymore. They just want to win. Hands down, Republicans will never have a day in office ever again. That's what they want. That's why they've been trying to import all these illegals. That's why DOGE found over 4 or 5 million of these illegal immigrants were not only in our voter rolls, but that they had voted. And now their whole point for fighting against citizenship, proof of citizenship and voter IDs is because they know for a fact that all these illegals have been voting and they want them to vote. They won't openly admit that, but that's been the goal from day one. Why else would you fight that? It's fraud. It's what it is. It's straight up trying to hide their fraud that they've been committing for years. The next executive order was Trump's reversal of all the Biden administration executive orders that eliminated all offshore drilling. Obviously, the United States, we need to be energy independent. I mean, that's national security right now. We cannot be dependent on energy from any foreign country. So if we cannot be energy independent, then why have a military? Why have anything? Because we can't fund our own military. We can't have the energy that our military needs to even make Jeeps run, to make Humvees run, to make planes run. We don't have any of that if we're depending on foreign nations for that energy. Pipelines, shale oil, offshore drilling, all that is critical to our national security. Not only that, but it's the very thing that's going to bring down inflation. When we can lessen our energy costs, the cost it takes to fill up your car at the fuel pump, the cost it takes to transport goods and services anywhere in this country, the lower the fuel costs, the lower the cost it takes to transport anything, the lower cost to heat your homes, the lower inflation will go, the farther your earned dollar will go. Why would anybody want to stop that? Well, obviously, again, it comes down to control. If we're energy independent, if we're not depending on these foreign countries, then we're not controllable. And that's exactly what the left wants. They want controls. They team up with these environmentalists who all they care about is what the United States is doing to help the environment. They don't care about any of these other countries. They're not going to go over to India or China or the Middle East and force their environmentalism on any of them. All they care about is restricting the United States because it's an ego trip for them. It's a power trip for them. It's not necessarily that they even care about the own words that are coming out of their mouth. It is all about power. It's all about ego. It's all about I'm better than you because I'm looking at the environment better than you are. It's the policies that they're preaching. They don't even care about their own policies. All it is that power that they feel that they're getting by being an environmentalist. Again, that's being stopped. The offshore drilling is being stopped. And then the last one here is the big one is USAID, freezing USAID and freezing all foreign aid. Why are we giving foreign aid to countries that hate us, that want to see us destroyed, that are working against us? Why are we as taxpayers being responsible for all these foreign countries when we can't even take care of ourselves? We look at our own communities, we look at our own streets and our own highways, we look at our own infrastructure, we look at all the homelessness, we look at our veteran population that is extremely underserved. We look at our education system that is extremely underserved. And yet we're responsible for paying every other country out there. And again, it comes down to without the money, they can't manipulate countries. They can't manipulate local organizations. They can't put out their woke ideology and programs that they're doing all over the world. They lose their power. It's holding that carrot in front of everybody saying, do this or else you don't get the money. And if they don't have the money to dangle out in front of them, where are they going to have their power? They completely lose that. And again, like I said before, a lot of that foreign aid, a lot of that foreign money is just money laundering because a lot of it winds its way back to campaigns and judicial pockets. It does. It's completely unethical. It's deceit. And as much as they're hiding it, as much as we'd love to disclose that, that could completely fracture the United States if all that was made known. So no, even though a lot of people within the federal government know that that's happening, they're willing hiding it because they're afraid of what that would do to this country. But everybody that's receiving funds from USAID and from all these foreign aid money, they're freaking out because they're losing their pocketbook again. It is astonishing to me how much power the judicial branch has usurped over the executive branch and even over the legislative branch through just judges. And they are decrying and bad-mouthing all the executive orders from President Trump, but yet they've done worse because the most of the programs that they've done, most of their woke programs, their ideologies, they haven't done through executive order. They've just done secretly. They just find funds from some program like USAID, or they steal funds from the Agriculture Department or from the Defense Department, or they steal it from the Education Department, and they get their deep state employees to go and just put these programs together, and just no one knows about it. All these regulations, everything they want, they just do under the mat. They don't need executive orders. They don't need legislation. They don't need anything. But yet they accuse Trump of usurping his authority when they've been doing it for 40 or 50 years without anybody in the public even seeing it. It has been top secret. But yet that's what's happening. So you have all these judges like Lauren Alkin. Lauren Alkin was appointed by President Biden, and she's the judge that blocked the Trump administration's sweeping plan to pause federal funding while it reviewed all these programs. So all these foreign aid programs, all any program that was where money was being spent by the federal government, Trump put a freeze on that until they could go through and examine each one of those programs. Yet you got a federal judge saying, no, that's against the Constitution. You have to allow all those funds to go through. And it keeps those pocketbooks going. It keeps those woke initiatives going. It keeps the deep state in power and producing their woke programs. Now you got a judge like Deborah Boardman. Deborah Boardman was again appointed by Biden back in 2021. And she was the second federal judge to overthrow Trump's executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship. Again, why would you eliminate birthright citizenship other than you want foreign nationals here in the United States and you want them eventually to be able to vote and keep the left in power? That's the whole reason. Again, the excuse is that anybody born within the United States should be a citizen. I mean, that's the excuse, but that was never, ever a part of the Constitution. It's always about bringing in the voter. That's always been the goal, is bringing in the voter. Now you got a judge like John, I have no idea how to pronounce this. It's Cohenor, I think. Judge in the Western District of Washington. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan, which should be a pretty good judge, but apparently not. He was the first judge to block birthright citizenship, calling it blatantly unconstitutional to disallow anybody born within the United States not to be a U.S. citizen. But yet we don't allow foreign dignitaries to have a child born here, even though that they are born here to be automatic U.S. citizens. It's just illegal immigrants. If they have a child here, they're automatic U.S. citizens. Where it should be is one of the parents needs to be a U.S. citizen and born in the United States. That's just the way it should be. Now, you got the famous judge, Paul Engelmeyer, who was appointed by President Barack Obama back in 2011. And he's the one that's been trying to block Elon Musk and DOGE from having financial records to a lot of these departments, particularly the Treasury Department, to find out where is the money going. And that's what the left is afraid of. That's why they're putting so many lawsuits against this. You've got 19 Democratic attorney generals from different Democratic states that are all trying to block this. Why? Because they're all getting funds from it, and they don't want you to know what they've done with the funds, how they've absconded with it, how they've put it out there. They don't want that information to see the light of day. We don't want you having access to that to make sure it's all legal and legitimate. They're afraid of what skeletons are going to come out of the closet once that information gets out there, because why else would they be blocking that? If there's a whole bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse, why wouldn't you want that out? As long as everything you're doing is above board, and then as DOGE goes through it, then your funds will just stay there. If you merit those funds, you're doing the right thing with those funds. Even if you're a Democrat state, part of these 19 Democrat states that are receiving federal funds, nothing would happen to your funds. You say, yeah, go ahead and look at it. Nothing's going to be wrong with our accounting. Nothing's going to be wrong with how we're using those funds. It's all it's all been spent exactly how we said it was going to be spent, how it should be spent. Why would they be blocking DOGE from going in there and seeing that unless there was something to hide, which we all know is true, because they've funded a lot of woke programs. They funded a lot of other ideologies. They funded a lot of things that they should not be funding. And they don't want any of that to see the light of day. So the famous Paul Engelmeyer is restricting that. Now you got Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who was appointed by Obama back in 2011. Trump had fired Hampton Dillinger from the Office of Special Counsel because he was a deep stater. He was not representing Trump. He was not putting forth a Trump agenda, what he wanted to do, which Trump has every right to do because he was the one elected into office. It's his agenda and nobody else's. He is the President of the United States. And when people are refusing to do that, and when he sees deep staters they're not in line with his program, he needs to be able to fire them. But yet, you have a judge that forced him to rehire Hampton Dillinger and put him back on the books. Again, how does a judge have any authority over the executive branch? Is what the executive branch can do in any of his departments. They all serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. Everybody within the executive branch, everybody. He was the one elected into office nationally, not this judge. And yet these judges are saying who they can hire and who they can fire and what money they can spend and what money they can't spend. That seems to me like a lot of usurpation of power there. Now you got Angel Kelly, who was again appointed by Biden back in 2021. And Trump is trying to restrict billions of dollars in cuts from the funding for health research grants. Now, we know that a lot of this health research grants and stuff are going to major universities like Harvard and all these other schools that are completely woke. And the vast majority of those research grants are not going to research. They're going to other programs within the universities. They're going into DEI programs. They're going into transgender programs. They're not going into health research. And that's what they're finding, is that a lot of these universities that are receiving these health research grants are putting some of the funds towards the health research, but then the vast majority of those funds are being manipulated and put into other programs, which is not the purpose of the grant. And so again, it's just another program out there where they can manipulate the money to go wherever they want it to go once it gets into their hands, because it's grant money. It's just free money. It was given to them. They don't have to pay the taxpayers back. They don't have to have any responsibility over it. There's no accountability on how or where or what they use the funds on. There's none of that. It's just, here's a whole bunch of money, do with it what you want to. And Trump was trying to shut that down. No, there needs to be accountability. There needs to be responsibility. How are you using these funds and where are you using these funds? And if you're not using them appropriately or according to the grant, then we need to pull those funds. And that's exactly what he did. But yet now you got another judge blocking that from happening. Because again, you're taking someone's pocketbook away from them. They're freaking out because you're taking the pocketbook. You got another judge here, Royce Lambert. Again, another Reagan appointee. This is the guy that's trying to block Trump from removing men from women's prisons. Again, why are you trying to block that? Why are you, as a conservative judge, as a Reagan appointee judge, trying to make it so that men can just claim to be transgender and be put in a women's prison? Again, that's not safe for the prison. It's not safe for the women. There's nothing equitable about that. And yet he's putting a block on that. Now you got a judge named Joseph Laplante, who was a Bush appointee back in 2007. This was the third federal judge to block birthright citizenship. So there's a bunch of them. And it sounds to me like Trump's going to have to go from court to court to court every single time a judge blocks that to get his birthright citizenship passed. Now you got another judge named John McConnell. John McConnell was appointed by Obama back in 2011. Now, again, Trump was trying to block a lot of funds from going to different woke programs, DEI programs within different states, particularly states that were allowing men in women's sports, were not getting rid of their DEI programs. So his threat was, if you're going to be allowing men in women's sports, if you're not getting rid of your DEI programs, if you're not abiding by the executive orders that I put out there, then I'm eliminating your federal funding. We're going to hold on to that, and you're not going to get any of it. So all these Democrat states that were pushing back on men and women's sports and allowing men to still remain in women's sports, not getting rid of their DEI programs, they're suing Trump saying, no, this is unconstitutional that you're holding our federal funds. And the judge just went through and mandated the White House pay out all funds that the states were requiring. And so he just had to pay those things out. So again, it's where the judicial branch is usurping a lot of authority over the executive branch. The executive branch is trying to enforce these states into abiding by Title IX, which is eliminating men from women's sports. He's trying to force these states to get rid of DEI programs and actually hire according to merit. He's trying to force these states to not be sanctuary cities or sanctuary states and comply with federal law, with ICE investigators and federal agents. And they're all pushing back on that. And so Trump used the pocketbook to enforce that. And they took him to court to try to reverse that. Next judge, his name is Carl Nichols. Carl Nichols was a Trump appointee back in 2009. Now, Trump, who is trying to downsize the federal government, put out a program to all federal employees and says, look, if you just willingly just resign, we'll give you 6 months paid leave or 9 months paid leave so you can go out and find another judge or another job. A very, very easy, simple way to downsize the federal government is if people just got up and voluntarily left on their own accord. Nothing could stop that. You wouldn't think a judge would stop that. You wouldn't think that that would be unconstitutional if I get paid to leave and I get 9 months severance to go find another job, why not? Why not take that? But again, a judge has put a halt to that, including the part where he was trying to eliminate USAID, and he was trying to force all USAID employees to come into the office and actually work in the office. Yet the same judge said, no, you can't force them to come to the office. They can be allowed to work from home. And we all know nobody's working from home. They'll probably put in a couple hours a day and call it good, and they're just getting paid to sit home and do nothing or to take care of whatever, do their yard work or do whatever else they're doing in the house. So a federal judge is saying that federal employees do not have to work in the office. Who of us, if we worked for a company and then the company said you have to come work out of the office, could easily go to the company and say, no, I'm not coming in. But you have to pay me anyway. You can't fire me. Where is that anywhere in the public? And why would a judge be allowed to force the federal government to maintain those type of employees and continue to pay them? Last judge we wanted to mention here is George O'Toole Jr., who was appointed by Bill Clinton in 1995, who was also trying to block the employees from just leaving on their own accord, and Trump offering them just paid leave. If you're a federal employee and we'll give you paid leave, you just quit. So he put out 2 orders. One was, again, like the other judge, eliminating the chance for employees just to get paid leave and just go find another job. But he also put out an order also impeding taking out men from women's prisons and allowing transgender men, and we all know that that's a fallacy, from being in women's prisons. And we could go on and on and on with all these judges that keep putting out rulings and fighting everything that Trump is doing. The problem is how all this federal judge stuff even started. You get one judge who made a ruling, and he was probably nervous about making the ruling. He probably was, I don't even know if I even have the authority to do this. But then you get the media, you get the left pushing, oh, Trump, you've got to adhere to what the courts say. If you don't adhere to what the courts say, then that's unconstitutional, and we're going to sue you, and you're not abiding by the Constitution. So they tried to fearmonger him into everything that any of these small district judges do. And so when the district judges see that they can have that type of authority over the President of the United States, it's going to incentivize and motivate others to do the same thing, because they're going to say, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And so the next judge puts out an order and says, well, he needs to obey me. I have more power and authority than the president has. And what prideful judge is not going to want to put out his authority like that and require that the president of the United States obey him? I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. So the next judge puts out an order requiring President Judge to do a certain thing, which again incentivizes and motivates the next judge, the next judge, and the next judge. And all of a sudden, there's no fear from any of these judges usurping the power and authority they've usurped over the executive branch, because all the other judges are getting away with it. Why can't I get away with it? And it becomes an epidemic, which is what it's caused now, where President Trump is just constantly trying to fight these smaller judges. When in reality, none of these district court judges should have that type of authority over the nation. They may be able to stop it for an individual or a district, but they do not have that national authority. And I'm sure what's happening in each one of these courtrooms is those who are working for Pam Bondi are going in there and defending Trump's executive orders, and they're putting forward and says, look, the executive branch has this authority, and it's always had this authority. It is in the right, and they're having to prove constitutionally that these executive orders are lawful. And then they're hopefully also putting out there that the judicial branch does not have the authority to do what it's been doing, that it has to rein that authority in. But you're asking the very judges that are usurping that authority to rein themselves in. So hopefully a lot of these things get up to the Supreme Court and they can rein in some of that judicial authority that shouldn't be being usurped like that and being abused like that, but also can make the rulings that asserts that the executive branch has authority to do a lot of these actions that it's been doing. But right now we have a rogue judicial branch, and the only reason why we have a rogue judicial branch is because the left, the congressional leaders, the senatorial leaders, and everybody within that party are pushing that from behind the scenes because they've completely lost their power in the executive branch. They do not have the White House. They do not have the legislator. They've had their hands tied there. And not only has their hands been tied, which has been tied before, but for the first time in our nation's history, Trump is going after the deep state and their funding, which has always been their backup. They've always known that doesn't matter if they have the White House or they have to stonewall the legislature for the next 4 years, their backup has always been, we have the deep state employees, we have the federal funds that we can manipulate, we can still get whatever program we want done. But to be losing the executive branch, to not have power in the legislative branch, and to be losing their deep state operatives and the funding they're losing everything. They're losing absolutely everything. And that is why the fight is so intense right now to stop what Trump is doing. Because it will eliminate everything. It'll completely dismantle everything that they've ever done for the last 40, 50 years. And that freaks out a lot of people in power. I hope Trump can pull that off. And I hope a lot of us will sit back and back what he's doing. Because what the most important thing he is doing is eliminating the deep state, those deeply entrenched government employees, and the funding that has been manipulated for so long. Millions and billions of dollars that have been manipulated for so long. And if he can do that, it will correct a lot of things for future generations. And we as the people will actually have our power back. We'll actually pull that power back from the federal government, which hasn't been done in a long, long, long time.